17th, 2019, we are here interviewing Mr. Edwin Gore for the Houston Asian American Archive. My name is Mary Brown.
And I'm Tinsley.
Alright, so let's start off with the question, where and when were you born?
I was actually born here in Houston, Texas. Born in January 18, 1950. Native Estonian.
Awesome. So how would you describe the household that you grew up in?
Actually, our household, my dad had a business on the east side of town in the Fifth Ward. It's a grocery store business, and it was probably not more than maybe 1,000 square feet in the front. We actually lived right behind the business, which was probably about 500 square feet. So when my parents finally finished having kids, we ended up having 7 kids in the house. And when I say it's a 4-bedroom little house. Actually, it was 4 beds in 1 room. Is how it kind of worked out. So a lot of us were kind of literally stacked next to each other. So we shared 1 room. We had maybe 3 bedrooms at the most, but one of them actually ended up being a stock room for groceries, for extras. So yeah, it was a little bit crowded, but 9 people in the house. It was interesting, fun for sure. I don't know how many people could survive that way, but it is what it is. We kind of had fun to some extent. So that was kind of how our house was back in those days. We eventually did move. About 10 years later after I was born, my mother saved up enough money to buy a house in another part of the city, in the area of Denver Harbor. And about 10 years after that, they saved up enough money to buy another house in Sharpstown, where my youngest brother and sister, actually went to school.
Okay, did you ever work at the grocery store?
Yeah, that's a question I don't think any Chinese kid that has a business ever has to worry about. Yes. So everybody was part of the store, part of the business. So as you got older, you graduated from doing stock business, stocking, shelves and all that, to working toward being a cashier and just kind of managing the whole store as you got a little bit older. So yeah, there's no question about it.
So I guess, what values did your parents raise you and your siblings on?
Well, the first thing I would say that I got out of working in the store was that I didn't want to work in the store anymore after that. And I think that was probably one of the things that they said, because they worked really, really hard. I mean, the grocery store business is one of these where you have to open the store by about 7:30 in the morning, and you really don't close until about 8 or 8:30 at night. So you're really open like 12 to 14 hours a day. And we did close half day on Sunday, though. So that was the only day that they got to do anything themselves. But I always have to congratulate and really admire my parents, because they literally worked side by side every single day that they were in business. So I will admit that very few of us today can think about working with our spouses literally 24/7. But they made it work, and that's an example. That's hard work and just being able to work together on a common objective of really putting kids through college is what they did.
Okay, so where did you go to school?
I went to school. If you can kind of remember, back in the 50s and 60s, the school was still very segregated then. So even though I lived in a predominantly African American neighborhood, my parents, my dad actually was the one who could drive. He would have to drive us into a white neighborhood where we'd go to school. And he did that, I guess, for most of us until they bought another house in another part of the city. He continued to have to drive us back and forth every day. So, in the morning, opened the store, got the store opened, and my mother ran the business, and then he would drop the kids off to school. And then in the afternoon, same thing, reverse, go back, pick us all up, bring us back to school, bring us to the grocery business and start working, and then doing homework, on top of that. So yeah, that was an interesting experience for that period of time. I did not, I think about my last year in high school was the first year that actually we had integration for the school. So that's my first experience having a black African American student in my school. Now, all through my entire life, though, growing up in that area, I had nothing but African American kids as friends and people that I knew. So played with them and everything. So to me, it didn't bother me at all. What bothered me at first, later on after I kind of figured, why am I going to a different school that has basically all white, very, very, very few Asians? They're all, and the other kids, I kind of went, did they go to school or not? That didn't hit on me so much later. So yeah.
So I believe you grew up when the Jim Crow laws were in
Um,
possibly?
I have to say that I didn't really think about it that way.
Okay.
I really, it didn't dawn on me what the effect of Jim Crow laws were until much later after I figured out what it was. Because I just never thought that that kind of thing would exist. And that's why I said, until you think about history, and part of me is really mostly STEM, a STEM person growing up and all that. I don't even think about the historical aspects of, the separation, the segregation, what it all meant. I do remember on occasion when there were riots around the city of Houston, uprisings in the city because of the racial discord there, that, for me, it seemed kind of scary and thought because my parents kind of thought, well, what's going to happen? Which really nothing happened to us, actually. We've heard about things in other neighborhoods. But for us, I think it was because we had a really good relationship with the people that supported our business, came to shop with us and all that. So we had good relationships. So I never thought that I would be scared, although, my parents were, of course, always scared of something because usually someone from outside your neighborhood that creates a disturbance. So, I have to say I was pretty, I wouldn't say sheltered, but just the fact that it didn't dawn on me all these things were going on until you think about it much later in life.
So when you did realize what all of this meant, what impact did it have on you?
Well, I'll tell you the first time I actually experienced any kind of overt, I call it discrimination, was when I myself went to college.
Okay.
So when I went to the University of Texas, it didn't dawn on me that other people didn't really like me or treated me differently until I got there, because it was there that I discovered there were a lot of kids who had never seen other minorities before. They grew up in small towns, or they grew up in areas where there were very, very few African Americans, Asians, Hispanic. So it didn't dawn on me until then that was happening to me. Because in high school and middle school, all through most of your school, you're pretty much sheltered in a sense because you're always with people friends, with classes and all that. So, and you get, I think I did have a little bit of issues in terms of bullying because being a smaller kid and all that. But I have to really say my friends were really good for sticking up for me a lot. I remember a lot of those issues where a kid would start bullying me. I didn't really have tormenting for a long time. Usually if one of my friends, who was usually bigger than me, saw that I was being bullied, he would actually take up for me. So I really had a lot of good friends, I'll put it that way. So, but yeah, and then it wasn't too much later that I experienced that. Now, how did it affect me later? I think I didn't internalize all that until I saw some issues of why others are being mistreated. And I'm talking about the minority kids. And it's mostly African Americans where I saw that at the University of Texas. But it still doesn't get really to me until somebody else kind of does the same thing to me. That I figured, why are they doing this? Or why does someone have that kind of hate or that kind of a discord with each other? So.
How did you overcome all those challenges?
I have to say that for the most part, my thought process behind this was like, it's out of my control to tell others how to act. I have to respond in terms of, I will only let those people affect me if I let them. I feel like if they do that to me, that is really their problem in terms of how they want to treat people. My impression has always been that I should try to treat people as I want them to treat me. And so if I kind of continue that thought process, if somebody does something bad to me, or I'm not. It's not that I won't be mad about it. It's just that I figured it out that this person has some problem or some issue with being able to accept that everyone has not only the right but the ability to determine their own outcome. And if you do that, I think you'll have a better level on each person in life. You just have to kind of maintain that a little bit of normalness in your own life, and don't let these other folks give you all this noise that says, "Well, I have to react to them." I'd rather than try to react to something that I'm doing, and people like myself trying to just say, well, how do we harmonize this whole thing to where people aren't acting like if someone is either below them or above them.
Did your siblings, your parents, ever face any kind of discrimination?
I think so. Yeah, I have to think so. I don't know about my parents so much, but the one thing I'll say about my parents is that I rarely have ever heard them say anything negative, even though all of our friends and customers and all that were African American. American, I'd say they were probably African American families on for probably 90% of their lives. I mean, we had friends and relatives, of course, who were predominantly Chinese, and we had a few friends who were Caucasian, but I never heard them say anything negative. People always talk about is racism inherent or is it learned or is it experiences? I don't think anybody's born being racist attitudes. I think it is kind of learned in the home or experienced through friends that you might have. So I really have to think that my parents kind of set an example by not being negative about people. I mean, why should they be negative about their customers? I mean, it seems kind of crazy to even try to be that way. But my parents were wonderful people about this kind of forgotten concept. But most of our customers were people who worked paycheck to paycheck, week to week. And so in many cases, if they needed groceries, my parents were very good about extending credit to them. Just saying, okay, you pay us, next Friday when you get paid. So they would have, ongoing. I mean, I just remember whenever we had a checkout receipt, they take their receipt. Okay, this friend has this, and say this kind of sign receipt. They put it on a little shelf over here, and they came back the following week to pay. They would just start going through their little book and looking for their receipts that they hadn't paid and added up, and they paid them. So it was a very, handshake agreement. The way they had any kind of, signed agreement. So, well, you're going to owe us, of course, no interest here. My parents didn't have a clue about how to do that. So anyway, they were good about that. I think that's the nice thing about my folks. They extended that kind of courtesy, and really it's take compassion. Somebody said, "Well, we should charge you like 20% interest because you were, hold on to this ticket for 20 days or 3 weeks or 2 days." So I think that's the example I kind of learned from them as well. Just having compassion about everybody else's situation.
Okay, do you perceive a change in the way Chinese Americans are treated today?
Definitely yes, because I see that just this is sheer numbers. I mean, there's just more. I remember going to school, other than my own brother and sister who were either a little bit older or a little bit younger than me going to the same school, I probably had no more than 2 other, and it's Chinese really. It would be long before more Koreans, Vietnamese, South Asian were coming into the city, who were immigrating to the city. That most of the people we knew were either my own siblings or related to me. So I don't think I had more than 5 Chinese Americans in my entire school, out of about maybe 2,000 at one time. So it's not until much later that we see that there's more. Just the sheer numbers, tell me that things are changing and will continue to change. I hope. And to me, it behooves us as Asian Americans to be more involved with other communities. I really think it's a mistake for us to kind of continue to congregate as either Chinese or Vietnamese or Korean, just all in one group. I think it's up to us to kind of reach out ourselves and talk about who we are, that we're not much different than anyone else. We have the same problems as anyone else. Nobody wants to see more taxes. Everyone wants to see better roads. Everyone wants to see better conditions in their neighborhood and those kind of things. So we're not much different.
So could you say again where you went to college and what you decided to study?
Yeah, I went to the University of Texas in Austin. I managed to squeeze a 4-year engineering program into 5 years. So it was one of those interesting things. I did not realize how harder it was going to college. And we talked about the types of schools. I went to Steve F. Austin High School, which is over on the east side of town. And I would say it was a prominent mix of white, Hispanic, and just a couple of 3 Chinese. But at that time, the school was predominantly white and Hispanic. Like I said before, we didn't have African American student come in until I was graduating, and he came in his 10th grade. Back then, it was only 10, 11, 12th grade, including, of course, 9th grade since then. So, I went to the University of Texas in Austin. I started an engineering career, studying that. I couldn't decide between chemical engineering and electrical engineering. So I decided I would go. I did not like all the labs, and my apologies to Dr. Norman Hackerman, who was here he was actually my first chemistry professor at the University of Texas. He eventually came here to Rice to become president of the university, and so I really didn't like chemistry that much. So I ended up going to electrical engineering, and that's kind of where I graduated with a bachelor's in electrical, and then I started working in a career doing that, working for Houston Eastern Lighting and Power was my first job out of college. I think one of the questions you asked me was what was my salary back in 1972, and it was an amazing $10,500 a year. You know, gosh, you couldn't even think about trying to raise anybody. I mean, try to live on $10,500 a year, but back in those days, of course, it seemed to be it was a good enough salary, I guess, for someone like myself just coming out of college. So that was my first job.
And do you have any questions? Since you just talked about your first job, was there any lessons that you learned and you took away from it as you think is important to you as a person today?
Not so much my first job. My first job taught me that there are jobs that say, what is the hurry to do something? I'm like someone that likes to get an assignment, do the assignment quickly as well as I can, and then turn it in. Depending upon the job you have, sometimes it is a rush thing, and sometimes it's not. So you try to find out ways to occupy your time. But one of the things that occurred to me after I took that job, I took another, ended up working with an engineering contractor here in town called Fluor Engineering, and they do predominantly construction jobs revolving around refineries, chemical plants, that kind of thing, which is predominantly what the southeast region of Texas is about, refineries and chemical plants. I took that job as one of the interesting things that taught me how to actually not so much work, but how to work in advance. I determined from that is I need to find out about the business side of how this thing works. The engineering side is not difficult. Once they train you, they give you all kinds of ways to do their work, the process. But I think you try to find out about yourself. How do you advance in a career? And that's something that, of course, coming from parents who had no business background in terms of or no professional background, they were grocers. But this is the kind of thing I say that most kids today, if you don't come from that background of business or a background of knowing how to act in the business place, things that they might expect you to do. This is kind of one of my passions about trying to teach younger kids today. How do you survive and advance in the business world today? Because everything is about business. It doesn't matter if it's about science and engineering or you're a math person. Eventually, business kind of tells you how you're going to. Obviously, you need to turn your life, your degree into some kind of skillful, productive life, right? That's objective. So I learned a lot from that experience because during the times when we had cutbacks in engineering, I said, well, how did they choose me, or how did they choose this person? And it's a lot to do with the kind of social personality side of yourself in the workplace as much as it is, because you're as good as anyone else, technically speaking. It's a matter of trying to find out how do I engage with my boss, and how do I engage with others that make decisions to advance. So I learned a lot from that experience there.
What is the most significant change or difference that you have noticed or experienced at work when you first started compared to now?
I would say the biggest difference is that there is a push for more people of color to be in advanced positions. So when you wonder to yourself, why is it? This has always been my concern when I was growing up too, but more so now that I'm an adult and I see what's going on. So I look at this from the standpoint of, if you look every year in high school, graduation classes, and college as well, you see how many Asian kids are the top 10% of their classes, right? I mean, you just don't have to even look through the newspaper, but every year I look through the newspaper, universities say, the kids are the top 10%, or those who get Jesse H. Jones scholarships and all that. And so in most schools, you're going to see Asian Americans, whether it's Chinese, Vietnamese, or South Asian kids there. And so you wonder, okay, so that's great. In college, whether it's University of Houston or Rice, University of Texas, same thing. You have kids who are magna cum laude and cum laude. Those are the top 10% of that class. Also, a lot of Asian Americans. But once you get into the workplace, that doesn't happen. You don't see that those same top kids or top people are rising toward advancing their career. So if you would think, well, maybe 10% of the workforce should have some kind of higher level position, whether it's middle management, upper middle management, or even CEOs and boardrooms. So you ask yourself, what happened? And he said, children become stupid and dumb all of a sudden? Well, of course not. That's not it at all. So you have to figure out what are the social skills. Now, I have to think it's probably a lot of the social skills, a lot of being able to figure out how do you advance in life, because I would say everyone has, for the most part, similar technical skills that you turn into life, turning into income, for instance. But after that, how do you make yourself marketable to advance up? And that's kind of the real, that's a question I will always kind of continue to pose to people. And it's not so much I'm saying that every company needs a certain percentage of Asian Americans there, but I think their consideration has to be that these individuals are also as capable to rise up above. So something is keeping that from happening. I don't have answers for that right now. I mean, I have some possibilities, but I don't have answers for that per se.
Can you recall the biggest challenge you faced in your career?
That is probably the one I would say is the challenge. It says, why is it, what am I not doing not doing enough of? I'm not saying that I would have done it. I'm just saying, give me the challenge of saying, what should I have done better to better myself in advancing in career. I will say I did have an interesting career change, and I think this career change really did to force me to do many things. So I decided, okay, I don't know that I've had enough of a challenge in engineering, because you only get to a certain point where then your technical ability is about the same as everybody else's. So then you need to rise into a management position or something like that to kind of separate yourself there. So I decided, well, I need to figure out what else I need to know how to do. So I went into a totally different area of work. I ended up going into sales. I said, well, sales is like totally out of the realm for most people in STEM. If you think people in STEM, and I apologize for sounding like I'm stereotyping all engineers, but they all tend to be very, quiet's not the right word, they're all very regimented in their personality. And I can say this about my own engineer friends, they probably say, well, they don't have much of a personality. So it's kind of one of these things where you stereotype engineers as just being very, very much nerd-like people. They're very good analytically, but as far as social skills, they're not very comfortable in those areas. So it forced me actually to go into an area where I could learn a lot about social skills, how to engage with others, and that really helped me a lot, in many areas, not just in that sales career, but in many other areas. And I think that kind of helped me develop those kind of skills to where I would say, I have to look at everyone and say, one of my bosses in that area always told me that if you always look at a person and decide, look at them and imagine that what's written across their forehead is, if I'm in sales, the other person I'm trying to convince this product or whatever it is, and it's created very well. I don't care if you go to Target or if you go to something else, so we're negotiating $1 million projects. And the question is across. If you look across the table, is written across their forehead is what's in it for me, or what's in it for my company. If I agree that this is the best idea since that I'm presenting to you, so we always had to look. I always had to look at it from the standpoint that if I were to put myself in that person's shoes, what would they want me to make sure that they get in exchange for what I'm trying to convey to them. So yeah, that was really a thing. I got into more sales and marketing. That was really a good thing for a person. It helped my personality change a little bit, forced me to do those things I had to do.
Where do you find the drive to keep motivating yourself?
Okay. I would say that it's when someone poses a challenge to me, and it's not so much they say, well, you can't do this. They're saying, what are you going to do about this? And I think this crosses a lot of social strata, social questions, And I think one of the first times someone asked me about doing something, he said to me, and because I had been elected in a fairly high position at this organization, and he knew this organization to be basically an organization that didn't do much in the community. And so so it was a newspaper guy, actually, a Chinese newspaper reporter. He said to me, well, what are you going to do this differently? Because most of the other individuals who had been in this position were predominantly Chinese speaking. In other words, they were some of the early newcomers to the U.S. and they've been in this business for years and years and years. And so for some reason, I got elected to this position. He said, "Well, what are you going to do? I mean, you're an ABC American born Chinese. You speak English well, and all that kind of thing." He said, "What do you think?" I said, "So what do you think needs to be done?" I mean, he knew us. He knew some of the problems of the communities and all that. He says, "Well, a lot of seniors here. They have a lot of the needs. The Chinese seniors don't. Number one, they can't speak the language very well. And number two, they can't negotiate healthcare systems or trying to access benefits that they actually deserve because they still don't know how to speak the language and navigate the system. They just can't get it." So I said, "What do you think they need most?" He said, "Well, you find that's your problem." I said, so asking, and so it turned out that throughout the city of Houston, they didn't have a senior meal program for Chinese Americans, for Chinese seniors. Now, that's not so much issue. You can kind of find ways because obviously in other communities, whether Hispanic or African American and white too, there were senior meal programs. So every day, 5 days a week, either you're getting a Meals on Wheels meal or you're needing a congregate setting at a center, for instance, and they're serving 56 to 100 meals a day. But we did not have one here in Houston back in, I guess it was the early 90s. It didn't have that program. So I think that's a challenge. I said, well, what can we do? So I'll always say this, is that when someone, and this is, I'll give you another example later, but when someone gives me a challenge like that, I kind of feel like, well, what can I do to make something happen to this? Because clearly they need the program. Not because all these seniors are starving over here. It's just they actually earn the same right to have that benefit. So I have to always thank my friend that I met at the city of Houston. He helped me tremendously, and I would say that that's one thing I'll always say about any project I work on is I always have to find the right people who know better answers to the questions than I do. I would spend an eternity trying to find the answers, but you just have to find the right people who know the answers. So he helped me. I found out how to do this. How do I set up a program for senior citizens? Doesn't matter if they're white, yellow, black, whatever. So he showed me this form, and I was able to get all the information together. Spend days and nights putting a proposal together, an RFP, and lo and behold, it got approved. And I'm not sitting there shocked. It's like people who do grant writing for a living. It's like here's this idiot engineer who decided to come up, pick up this stuff, and start helping. But Rafael Medrano helped me out tremendously in putting that proposal together. It got approved by the city. The first program we had was 50 meals for seniors. But here's the other point about it. The city of Houston, if you can imagine, has one or two food vendors. So, of course, are any of them proficient in cooking Chinese food? No. so the first meals that were coming out were like meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and peas and carrots. Okay. So what happened was the first week or two or three, I think, seniors were throwing away half their meals. I said, well, that's not acceptable. And milk too. They do milk, but throw it away. What are they used to drinking? Hot tea. Some kind of a Chinese meal. That rice, especially rice. You gotta have rice. So we found a lady who was willing to help cook meals, design meals, because she had a commercial style kitchen. And so Brenda Chungerton, and unfortunately Brenda is no longer with us, but she and her husband took it upon themselves to say, okay, we'll provide the senior meal program for the Chinese seniors. And of course they cook very nutritious meal for Chinese. So we talked about having cultural sensitivity and cultural competency when we're putting these programs together for seniors. So that was kind of my first foray into doing that. And like I said, totally shocked me when this grant got accepted. So the challenge is the challenge to do it. People say you can't do it, or it's too hard, or it's too much work, or it's too much trouble. I would encourage anybody, take up a challenge, go do it.
Have you ever faced any case of racism or racial stereotypes at work? And if yes, did you fight back, or what do you think could have been done to alleviate the situation?
Well, when I was growing up and in the workplace, I think things were much different than they are today. Much, much different. I didn't take racial comments made about, not just about me, but just about my race, in terms that it was a negative to me. these were people who knew me. I mean, if someone that didn't know said that to me, I'd be a little upset. But I didn't experience that. I did experience it a little bit, but I kind of brush it off. Number one, I have to think about my own survival. Who am I? I'm like 5'7", 50, 60 pounds. Most of these people are making comments are generally going to be 5'10", 6 feet, 6 feet 3, 200 pounds. So I think about my survival first. And I said, okay, big deal. So that person's ignorant. They're uninformed. I don't even say ignorant. I just think they're just uninformed, and I think they follow it. But so today, if a person said those things to me, I would say I would react much differently because I think some people should know better. Now, I don't hold everybody. I don't think everyone is racist by nature. I think it's mostly just not being informed about that stuff, and that's why I say it's so important for us as Chinese, as Koreans, as Vietnamese, as South Asian, to be involved more with the community. I always feel that the more people know about you and your community and the people you represent, the more they're comfortable with you. I think most people are fearful more than anything else about, I don't know if I should speak to that person because they look so different to me. I don't even know if I can say hello to them because they may not understand what I'm saying. There's a fear of being rejected. I think that's a rejection sort of thing. I say, if I say something and I have to say, I don't speak English or something like that, they'll feel like, okay. But no, I don't. I think today is much different. I think our sense of trying to help people understand who we are is, I think people are just less tolerant today. I think in terms of what racism means. But that doesn't mean there's not racism. I'm saying that I think we need to start understanding that we just can't jump off and sort of holler and scream that we're just not going to accept that person because they said that to me. I need to find out why. We are all product of our own, either how we were brought up, our own experiences in life. So once we're away from our parents, everything that we absorb is part of our experience and how we treat everyone else. So hopefully we're trying to get better. I'm not sure it's getting there yet, but I think we'll have to figure out a different path to understand the different parts of racism.
You are a past president of the Houston chapter of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance,
Yes.
CACA, a powerful organization created in 1895 with chapters across the U.S., and their missions include fighting against racial discrimination, opposing anti-immigration, etc. Members of this organization tend to be first-generation Chinese Americans of immigrant parents arriving in the U.S. since the late 19th century. Do you have any concerns over the aging of this organization and the future of the CACA?
All great questions. And yes, I'm concerned about that quite a bit. I think that's a concern of every organization that's been around very long. I think I see the same thing happening in chambers of commerce, for instance, like Kiwanis clubs, other kinds of lodges that have been formed for a variety of reasons, and a variety of good reasons, actually. The aging of the original members is extremely important to why organization exists. I think we need to figure out different ways to attract new members, and part of the problem, of course, is older members have a tendency not to allow younger members to assume leadership positions very quickly, and it's something that I know that for individuals in generations of recent college grads and those who are millennials and even some Gen Xers and all, they have a tendency to want to gravitate toward higher level of position responsibilities. I mean, I love having younger people working on things that I'm working on because they have a lot of energy. But the organization originally was formed in 1895, and this is kind of an interesting point that this year is the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, because the organization was actually formed because of the mistreatment of the railroad workers back in the 1890s. After the railroad was finished, they were basically thrown out in the streets, many of them killed, beaten, and scapegoated for the ills of the economic conditions of the country at the time. So CACA came about because several people responded back to pushing back on the fact, why are you beating us up, killing us? So we demand for civil rights. So a lot of the actual interesting court cases. This is where it's kind of really crazy to me about back in the 1890s is that you had Chinese who actually had the courage to use the thing. I mean, we have a hard time trying to get Chinese to do anything in the legal system because they're all scared to go to the legal system. I hate to have to tell you that shit costs like $500 an hour. But I have to really say that these men and women had courage to actually retain the legal system to affect some of these things. So some of the court cases that came about, and I have to attribute to the people that were associated with CACA back then, was for instance, the issue of birthright citizenship with the Wong Kim Ark case versus the U.S. Wong Kim Ark, you kind of remember me, actually born here, went back to China to visit, came back, and they wouldn't allow him back in because they thought he wasn't a citizen. And so he had to go prove the fact that he had papers that said he was born here. So that whole court case kind of established those things. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that's very interesting, and I'm glad you two ladies are here because people always figure that Chinese value male children more than they do female children. You heard that? Yeah. So one of the court cases had to do in San Francisco was they did not allow a Chinese girl to go to public school. So there was a landmark court case there as well in San Francisco where a Chinese girl, the firstborn in this family, was the subject of the court case. And I thought to myself, gosh, here's a family decided back in 1890s, 1900 that my daughter is so important to me to get an education. I'm going to spend every single penny that I have to retain a lawyer so that she can go to the schools I want. So it told me, people should look at this and said, see, somebody does value the female part of this because they want her to get an education. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing that kind of brought to my attention about why our members are so old is many members joined CACA because back in the early days because they could not join any other organizations. They were not allowed to join other mainstream organizations. So that was another reason, and which kind of brings me to kind of a project I've been working on recently. When I was national president several years ago, I looked at our membership because I got a chance to travel around the country, visit various chapters and lodges, and many of these guys were older. And I said, it's interesting that the demographic of the older membership were people who are World War II veterans, and many of them are now in their 80s and 90s, and they're still alive. They're probably closer to 100 now. And I said, one thing we could do for them is to see if we can get a Congressional Gold Medal for those who served during World War II, because very few people even know that Chinese served in the Civil War, World War I, Spanish American War, World War II, and all the way through now. And so last year we finally got a bill passed in Congress, signed by the president, that would award the Congressional Gold Medal to Chinese American World War II veterans. And unfortunately, 90% of them have passed away now. But I thought that would be a thing we should do. Now, that was another challenge somebody said to me when I tossed the idea, how should we do this? Because it's like a lot of walking on the Hill, lobbying Congress, lobbying people here in the city, even and across the country, really, because you can't just work on a few people. You know good well. There's very few Chinese in North Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, those in Montana. Those states have very few. So it's hard to find constituency to encourage them, the senators and the congressmen who represent those districts, to be part of it. So, but we finally got it done. We got the bill passed, and so now we're just trying to register all of the Chinese Americans who served in World War II, get them a Congressional Gold Medal, and just honor their legacy for being here. Because I look at them as no different than I think Tom Brokaw calls them America's greatest generation, right? That generation back in the 40s and 50s who served then. And I said, Chinese Americans are also part of that generation. So to me, it was another challenge. Somebody said, you can't do this. It's too much. It's too hard. It is hard to pass a bill. Even try to pass a bill in Congress, it's hard to pass a bill right now in Congress. So I have to thank a lot of our good friends and members of CACA across the country who lobbied their own congressperson to get to sign the bill. So just another, hey, you can't do this. I said, yeah, let's try.
So you said a lot of the members are older.
Yes.
Have you been able to encourage and recruit members from the younger generations?
Well, it's like projects like this, like this one with the Congressional Gold Medal. I have gotten more people who are younger now involved because a lot of, when I say that the kids of these veterans, they're not kids actually, they're people in their 60s and 70s as well, but it's the grandkids that I think are going to really get a thrill out of hearing that their father, their grandfather, or uncle, or that a CACA or any other organization. I mean, there are some wonderful organizations out there that I can talk about as well that do some wonderful work. The people at OCA do a lot of great work, and Committee 100 they do some things as well that kind of help us bind together I think it's kind of the fabric of all Chinese Americans in the country. I think to see that there are projects, activities that we're doing that could involve them. What gets them involved? What gets younger people involved with it? It's to me a lot of things having to do with some social justice issues. I mean, there is some social justice involved around why haven't Chinese Americans been recognized as well? I mean, and a lot of others have gotten things like this, but I think it's a matter of getting that kind of thought process into organizations that will help us recruit new members or get them interested at least in helping us out with things like that.
Have you noticed changes in perspectives of the younger Chinese Americans relative to CAC's mission statements?
I think they're very similar missions still going on. I mean, the whole issue of civil rights is I think it's seen more today in civil rights in the African American Hispanic community, especially here in Houston. I don't see as much issue with how Chinese do. So it's almost as though Asian Americans would have to almost embrace some of the similar issues going on with African American and Hispanic communities. Is it not happening in Asian circles? I think it is. I think there are still some areas in the Vietnamese community because as some of the newer immigrants, they still face some of the challenges from various areas of society. Especially with police enforcement and that kind of thing. It's a lot of language barrier, a lot of cultural differences that a lot of folks don't understand, especially maybe like in the police department, fire department, wherever they have engaged folks that do not have a culture, like language, they have language barriers. Some of the other areas would be health issues. So for instance, a lot of people don't understand. A lot of professionals in the medical area may not understand how Chinese view medical issues, like like there's Western medicine and Eastern medicine. There are some folks who still have some issues about that. Well, should I be taking this drug? It's a drug that has 100 side effects to it. Whereas if I just drink a cup of herbal tea, I'll get everything resolved. It's something of a mix between trying to figure out what's the best of those both worlds that can help us do that. So, I think the whole thing, the competency, is the challenge. I think for the younger. And I would say if younger people want to get involved with something, health disparities is one big issue because there are certain ailments, diseases, whatever. They're specific to Asian Americans that are not involved, that don't affect others as heavily as our group. And so that's an area that you get involved with. Yeah.
Are you married?
Yes, married to Beverly Gore. She just retired from the city of Houston. She has a doctorate in dietetics from the University of Houston. So she's been very active as well in the community, probably more active than I am. She's the one that's more involved with the cultural competency concerning Asians. She and three other ladies actually started the Hope Clinic. It's been 20 years now. They started as a once a week in a small location on the southwest side of town, and now they have 4 locations across the city. And originally it was designed to kind of serve the needs of Asian Americans, but as it's turned out now, Asian Americans only account for about 40% of their clientele. The rest are from everywhere. I mean, Hispanic, Black, white. So depending on where the community is. So it did start off in Southwest Houston in the Chinatown area, and it's one of the clinics. But even that clinic there is now predominantly not Asian American as far as the clientele goes. But the key thing there is, I believe my understanding was they speak 32 different languages. So somebody on staff, there's a staff person that speaks at least 1 or 2 languages. So for instance, if that is the big challenge, isn't it? Is if you go to a doctor that's with a group, well, most of the time they only speak English, right? So here it is, you go in there and you only speak some other language that is not common. But at Hope Clinic, it is a very qualified health center. So people that go there, they they have enough language competency there so that they can speak to the patients in their own language. So I mean, that's been a key to their success, and it's been widely touted for all their work. So I give her all the credit for all that. That's her doing. I mean, we kind of we don't necessarily challenge each other, but I think it's more like we're really kind of involved in the community and want to make sure that there are things that we see that if they're needing that we want to be there to help if we can. I mean, we can't solve everybody's problem, but I think little by little, the example sets itself. So yeah.
Do they intentionally move from Shinto to speaking like several languages?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that is the whole key. I mean, you could find clinics all over the place. Mm-hmm. You could find clinics, in the African American Hispanic community, and of course they're going to speak, Spanish for the most part in the Hispanic community, and then the competency for others is, whatever they have. But language is the key issue as far as accessing healthcare, because it's hard to tell somebody where you hurt, how you feel in English, because it's a more difficult way. But if you can express it to them in their own language, that makes a lot of difference in how the doctor or the nurse or the practitioners there can do it. So they've done that. They've actually even expanded into dental and vision services too there. So I mean that's the thing. But yeah, you're right. If you can speak several languages, and this is kind of the nice thing about the city of Houston is that there are so many people who do just speak different languages here that if they're having interest in helping out and have a health background, that would be a tremendous asset to have. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely something to look for.
Where did you and your wife meet?
Actually, I was. Her brother was my roommate in college. So that's another stage. Okay. So obviously, we our families kind of knew each other, loosely. Because her family had a grocery business as well, and they her family's business was predominantly in the Ship Channel, which is predominantly Hispanic area, and so she learned how to speak Spanish. That's kind of her language 1A, English 1, and Spanish 1A. So that's kind of how we had some things in common. We had grocery business, so we kind of knew each other's. Okay, you had to work in the store. I got to work in the store. That kind of thing. So that's how we met. Yeah, my brother-in-law, he was one of my roommates in college, and so he we'd go to his house and see his sister there. Okay, this looks like an interesting person I'd like to meet. And all. So that's kind of how we met. So we I think I started dating her like my last year in college, and she was like 2 years in college at University of Houston. So yeah, so we dated for a few years, and this is good work, I think. So yeah, so we've been married 44 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 44 years.
Do you have any children?
Yeah, we have one daughter. Yeah, one outstanding daughter. I've always said that hey, girls are the way to go. I think they're easier to raise, but I will always say that our daughter is one of the easiest. And we only have one child, so I had another thing based on it. Said our daughter was an easy person to raise. She was always younger than people in her class, because the funny thing about it was she skipped one grade. I think she did kindergarten, first grade, because her teacher at one of the daycare schools heard somebody reading to the other kids in school. So she looks over to the corner and she sees my daughter reading to the other kids, and most of the kids in kindergarten are barely knowing their ABCs, much less knowing how to read. And so they told Beverly that she shouldn't be here. She's getting bored very quickly, and so they skipped a grade for her. So she's always been at least a year younger than everybody else in the class. But she went on to University of Texas to get a degree in communications and journalism and all that. So she's a full-time mom now. She's married to a fellow who's a pastor of a church in California, and we've got 3 great little grandkids. 8-year-old, 5-year-old, 8-year-old girl, 5-year-old boy, and a 6-month-old little girl. So for Haley, Abigail, and Austin, we love them to death. You get grandchildren. It's spoiled them. That's our job from now on. So, but Yeah, that's always been a challenge, I think, when you're raising kids. So I've always, thought, girls are easier. But now that I have a grandson, I said, he's a big challenge. I tell you, he's a big challenge. So, but yeah, everything's really good in terms of all the kids that we've got. They all seem to be very focused on things. Hayden's a great student in schools. We don't speak Mandarin, but we speak a dialect of Toisan. But actually, she's going to a Mandarin school where it's like a Mandarin immersion school. So she's learning Mandarin, and my daughter's picking up more of that because you have to reinforce it at home. If you don't speak the language at home a little bit, they're going to lose it at home too, especially during the summer now. So, but she's really a good student, so it's going to help. My grandson, different story. You got to get him more engaged with the education. He's a smart kid too, though.
So how do you identify? Do you identify as Chinese, or as American, or in between?
Well, definitely American, I would say. I mean, I have to look at it. The funny thing about it when you say that is, if someone talks to me on the phone, they've never met me before, and my name is not a giveaway that I'm Chinese. Even I don't have a name such as Wong or even Lee's not necessarily a giveaway either. But obviously, there's some names that if it's like a Wong or Chung or Chang, it's pretty easy to figure out you must be Chinese. But when they see mine, they don't think one way or the other. So it's not until they meet me they just don't expect it. They just and I have you'll see later today when I really get lazy and I start really having a southern accent, or really southern, really get into that Texas stuff. But for the most part, they don't see me as being Chinese, and I think that's part of the whole thing too. Is that I'd be kind of surprised how many people when they talk to me, they see me as Chinese. I mean, they see me, but they don't see me as Chinese. It's not much is that good or bad. I think it's okay. I mean, I think it's good they see me as a person with either common interest, a personality, not one or the other. It's just like saying I'm just a regular person that's trying to be part of society, having the same issues of like I said before, not wanting to pay taxes as much as anybody else. My taxes are too high. My roads are bad. My neighborhood's falling apart. Trash didn't get picked up. The same issues that a lot of people have around the city, or why aren't some people getting better services than others, or that kind of thing. So I think people see me that way. I hope, and that's kind of what I hope. I don't necessarily. I mean, I follow a lot of the Chinese traditions and customs and all that too, but it doesn't seem to. And I want to introduce that to other people too when I see them, because I do want to take them to some of the things that we do in the community as well, to introduce them to the fact that there are many good things about being Chinese, and there are so many good things about just being a regular person in society that identifies them. I think that's what's helped me a lot, is that I don't try to force anything upon people. Like, this is like, I'm Chinese and you need to be respectful Chinese. I said, well, just respect me as a person who is trying to help. We're all trying to survive in the same place. So trying to make sure we all live together.
Do you have any advice for your grandkids or just future generations in general?
I would say that for anyone, and my grandkids too. I mean, I hope that they take the example from their parents, my daughter and my son-in-law, and as being people who are driven to accomplish things, whether it's in their own life or for the benefit of others. Take on challenges. I mean, if you're going to try to challenge yourself each day, I figure what's the use of just hanging around here just to absorb and take advantage of whatever we have here. I think we all owe ourselves and the communities and where we live in. We're here for a purpose. Figure out what the purpose is. It may take a while to do that. That's always a challenge. Figure out what it is. Just get it. Just step in and get yourself involved. Just get dirty with it. Figure out what you need to do. Figure out what you want to do, and keep going for that. I mean, you never find your best first job as the first job. You have to, and you never find the first things that happen to you as being the best. But continue to challenge yourself. But what I find out better than anything else is get challenged by people around you who will do the same things and challenge you to do it. I've always always said you should always find people who are just a little bit better than you. Not totally better than you, because that'd be too much of a challenge. But find people that are a little bit better than you, and follow them, and they'll follow you. Actually, a lot of times you think they're better than you are, but they think you're better than they are. So we kind of challenge each other. Actually, we kind of want to make sure that we're all working together. And I think when you have a spirit of working together and some camaraderie and have some fun. I'm always about having some fun too. You can just do these things and not have a little bit of fun with the people that you're working with. But I would say that's the way. Just kind of keep finding out what am I doing today that's going to make things a little bit better. I don't think most of us can do quantum changes. I think most of us are here to try to at least make it a little bit better every day, just a little bit. Very, very, very few of us can be president of the United States or mayor of the city or even president of United Rice University for that matter. So we have to figure out what are the things that I can do as an individual to affect a little bit of change.
So you have been a strong advocate for the Chinese American community in Houston. I know you've even been involved with Houston International Festival, Texas Gulf Coast Workforce Commission, Sheltering Arms Senior Services, which is a United Way agency, and to the Holocaust Museum. Can you tell me more about what you have done for the Houston community?
Well, each one of those has been a area where I got involved with because they have similar objectives as I do. What are they doing at the Holocaust Museum that gets their story out? Because part of the things about the Chinese community too is we don't do a good enough job getting our story out there. We tend to want to continue on with another project or make more money or get hired, those kind of things. We don't do a good enough job of talking about some of the positive aspects of our contributions to the mainstream society. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to do that. In the Holocaust Museum and like the Houston International Festival, which is really going well, is that they tried to focus. The festival tried to focus on different cultures. So each year they would honor a different country. So some years it's like a Uruguay or a China or Brazil or I personally like to do the South American countries because the music's like better. It gets you a little more excited. But so we try to focus on different countries and try to highlight some of the aspects of each country to see what are we doing here in Houston that we can highlight those specific countries. There are communities. They call it Houston most diverse city. I guess that's true. So that was during the festival. The Holocaust Museum focused on, of course, all the death and the atrocities to Jewish community, and I think that when we look at that, we have to look at it and say, what are people doing to other communities as well? That's as tragic as that, and a lot of people don't realize that Chinese, in addition to being the road worker individuals, that Chinese across the country, but especially in the California area in the early 1900s and all, were actually massacred in Los Angeles. And there's a huge story that a lot of people don't know about, the massacres of Chinese in LA. And so, is that to say that we should always bring out the negative side of it? No. It's actually to bring out the fact that everyone has suffered some amount of hatred, discrimination in the country. No one is given anything, I think, in this country per se. Those who may get refugee status, but everyone comes here at least with an equal opportunity, we hope, to try to find the success. Now, is it always what equal opportunity? Not really. You have to think about, well, what's my access to government? What's my access to healthcare? How do I get to it? Because you can say you have the opportunity, but if you don't have access to get there, that you don't have an opportunity to grasp onto that. So, what I've learned from all those organizations, all those mainstream organizations, is this: you always learn from other groups, other people, how to do things better or differently. That makes it better. I cannot even imagine how I could have done some of the things that I've done without the experience and the savvy of people who have been around. You just always have to be in a place where you are. Today you have TED Talks, right? You go online and hear TED Talks all day and try to make yourself a better person. I think that kind of works. Some things I have listened to several, and they've helped me out that was my objective. I said, I don't know enough about it, but I've been fortunate to have people that came to me and said, you need to be part of this organization, this organization. And I took that as a challenge too. I said, what can I do to help? But most of the time, they've helped me to learn things about that I could not learn by just reading a book, or just watching TV.
So what would you say your legacy is?
I don't know if I have a legacy. Oh, they have legacies now? My legacy. Geez, that's a good one. Good question. I don't know if I could write a legacy by myself. I think I'd just like to people to know that I've done some things, but do I want the credit for them? Not really. It doesn't matter. I think that the whole point would be, if somebody would say, okay, there's a, I guess I would say maybe with this thing of getting veterans their Congressional Gold Medal, I would say that it was, without the support of the CACA, my national organization, of course, couldn't get done, first of all. But I'd like people to think that I thought of doing things differently and as a challenge to could he get it done. I always looked at things like I could do them. I don't know if they'd always turn out. I would have to say I've been pretty successful for the most part, undertaking projects, because I always try to find the right people to help me. And I think that's a real big key. As long as you continue finding people that have a common goal as you do, they have a vision. That's probably the best word. They have a vision for doing some of these things. I don't think I myself may have a lot of vision. I take vision from other people and say, that's just an idea. I need to grasp onto that. And I always be thinking about different ways to do these things and share some common visions and keep going. But yeah, legacy, I don't know. It's just one of those things that you don't think about. I think legacy was after you've been dead by 50 years. Oh yeah, the guy did that. So that may be about the only thing I would say. Is that how did these guys get this Congressional Gold Medal? I said, it's because CAC started, because this crazy guy decided he'll take on the challenge. But it was a challenge, I got to say. Having to get a bill passed through Congress is pretty tough. You can see how many bills actually do go to Congress and never get passed. They just sit there and do nothing because of disagreements in both houses and both parties, for that matter. But yeah, I would say just take on a challenge and do it. That's probably the thing I'd say. That's my legacy.
So are you still working? Or
no, retired. Yeah. Well, I had to retire to do more volunteer work and not get paid to do. See, that's yeah. A lot of these things, I take on the challenge because I'm more of a hands-on person.
Okay.
I delegate enough, but I'm always uncomfortable unless I know enough about what everybody's doing. Then after I'm very comfortable with people that I work with, and vice versa, I'm comfortable with me working on things, then they basically leave me alone, which is kind of the key to how people can actually thrive and get better, is that your supervisors, your bosses, end up trusting you because they see that you are able to handle efforts and projects and assignments well. I mean, that's in the workplace especially, is that you don't want a boss who's always looking over your shoulder, because that doesn't give you flexibility and freedom for doing things differently. Because one of the things I've always said about what my boss always told me, he said a couple of things, is whatever you do, don't ever surprise me. So, make sure you do the work. And I think he says, whenever I looked at my boss and said, what is my boss interested in? What is he trying to accomplish in his work? And I would say, whatever he's interested in, I'm like 3 times as interested in it, because it's going to help him get his objectives. As long as he's getting his objectives, he's seeing that I'm helping him meet his. So it's not just about me and my work, it's about that. So I've taken that kind of attitude to other things as well. Now, not all volunteers take that same attitude, too. Because they say, well, I'm just a volunteer. Well, I don't think that's true. I think if you don't bring that same attitude of work, the work aspect into the volunteer world as well, you'll find that volunteer organization is not going to survive either. Because if you have a lot of half-doers and people that, well, I'm just doing it if I have time, well, those organizations don't survive very well, because there's an expectation even when you volunteer, right? If you go to an organization and you volunteer, you should give your best effort, just like you're getting paid for it, because that's the success of every. And I find it to be true of every organization I've joined. The success successful organizations are ones where officers and other members of the board are people who have high expectations of each other, and so they produce. So when you do go and ask to be on board, that's really the hope. These people are sharpening each other. So I try to bring that same aspect into some of the other community organizations. It doesn't always work, but at least my expectations are higher, and so maybe that's a good or bad thing. But I think even the volunteer, I always feel that in order for that organization to really be successful, you'll also have expectations of the volunteers.
So do you like any books or movies? Like, how do you spend your time?
I read parts of books.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really watch a whole lot of movies. I think Crazy Rich Asians was the last movie I saw, which was helpful in terms of Hollywood is finally recognized that we have Asian Americans who are in the movie industry. As a good thing. So I mean that's another reason I like to watch romantic comedies. Actually, I'm not much for all of the Matrix and other movies. I figured out my feeling is I don't like things that computer generated action films because I know everything's there. There's no risk there. I mean, it's computer generated. I know that guy's not really in trouble. I know there's no risk. I know that there's not even a stunt person doing it because they can generate it so that it doesn't look like the guy's in trouble at all. I'd rather watch the exciting movies if I know it's at least a stunt person doing the dangerous work. Because then I know that's what makes it a little bit exciting. I mean, it's definitely not going to be the star of the show is going to get killed or get hurt. It's going to be somebody, but at least it's somebody that's there that can identify. So there is a reality there. But so I read parts of books because what I end up doing is I start reading the beginning and I start getting kind of bored with this part. Let me flip over to something else that looks more interesting. And so that's kind of a reason why I do a lot of jotting down of notes on my phone. And so I will say, oh, that sounds like a good thing to say. So I do a lot of, I almost say like my degree is almost like a copy and paste degree. I shouldn't say that. But you too, if I take my degree away. But I would say it's more like I would try to find things in books that I would use and I could paraphrase or use as guidelines for how I like to do things. And one thing that I would say about how we try to do things, I would always try to be very honest with people about things. So I would say to them, if I can do it, I will. If I can do something, I will tell you I will do it. If I don't know how, I'll find out. Right? If I don't know how, at least I'm somewhat smart enough to find out for you. If I can help you, I will find out. If I don't know how, I'll tell you. I won't say, okay, I'll let you know in 3 weeks. If 3 weeks pass by and I come back to you, I couldn't find out what to do. I should find a way to tell you that immediately. If I don't know how, and I can't find out how, I will have to at least tell you that I can't do it. And so I kind of operate by that principle. To be honest with people, just tell them, can you do it or not do it? And if I can't do it, I want to direct them to the right place though. I want to say, well, I can't do it. Well, where else can I go? Well, I'll find out. That part I can find out. But I may not be able to tear apart this camera over here, but at least I can. If I want to find out how, I'll find out how. But if I don't, I'll tell you, hey, you need to go down the street to somebody to get you fixed up. So I think I try to find those kind of things in the books and use those as kind of my operating principles in my own life. Actually, a lot of them are kind of funny. Actually, I can't think about them. But I keep them on my phone so that if I need something to think about and say, I'm going to look for it. But yeah, I got to know this thing. So yeah, I don't read books per se, but I read parts of books and kind of pick things out.
Do you have any final questions?
Yeah, I actually was, because we were talking about licensing,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of been very mentioned about it, but is there any financial issue of the ITC in the Asian community?
Good question. Desirable change. I would like to say that we invite more people who are not like us into the community, so that they can see that all the things that we're doing are really good things. I mean, they may not like them. I know a lot of people don't like Chinese food. How can that be? But they don't. but I accept that. That's fine. So I go eat where they want to go eat when we go out to eat. That's fine. I have no problem with that at all. But I think it helps us to help others see that we are different, but really not that much different. When we talk about some of the differences that we do have, it turns out we don't have that many differences. And so I don't know exactly what people put up for reasons why they would say I don't like Chinese or I don't like Vietnamese or all that. Some of the issues have to do with things really probably are not necessarily true. They hear things and they think they embrace those things. Well, that must be true. So they always get all these benefits, or so and so is always getting things, whatever. So I think it's a matter of saying, how do we get more people involved in our own communities? But really, actually, we are the minority of minorities of all communities, right? As far as numbers go, I think it is up to us to make that engagement to help other people understand us. Because as long as somebody else is in the majority of the numbers, why do they need to reach out to us? You think they should, but that's not human nature. Human nature says they stay in a comfortable area, right? They stay in their own comfortable zone. For us, we have to kind of get out of our comfort zone. We just can't hang out all together because we're still only hanging out with 5% of people. Right? Everybody else is still out here, so they can leave us alone because they maybe not really care. But for us, I think it behooves us to be more proactive in getting ourselves out. That's why I say that even in history, we need to tell people, we were there fighting alongside of you. We were there. We were working on the bridge with you. We were there. We were trying to help other people in the hurricane. And we were. There were a lot of people out there in boats helping your Harvey and other hurricane disasters. So I think it's a matter of us doing that, and a lot of times it's a matter of showing up and showing our faces there, because some people say, well, there were never any Asians out there helping during Hurricane Harvey. Well, that's not true. But unfortunately, we're not many of us out there. That there's not a news carrier place where we are, because we're only be a limited number of places. So it does help us if we get out there a little bit more. Hope that makes making sense to you. Yeah.
More questions? All right, thank you so much for coming in today. I really enjoyed interviewing you.
Oh, hope so. Right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.